So this is part 2 to my air combat tactics video. This one will be a shorter video than the other one. It's not going to run on for an hour or so, I hope. So what I'm going to cover in this video is the things that I've learned the past couple of weeks, because I've got a lot of experience now in team combat tactics, air-to-air combat tactics, which wasn't the case when I first made the first video. The guys in my squadron cabs, they've all made an effort into learning this kind of stuff, and we've managed to try applying it in our games, and they've worked out like really well. If you look up the highlight games from episode 3 onwards, you'll see it in action, and it's produced quite a lot of good results. So I'm just going to go over some of the things that I've learned in the couple of weeks, and then I'm going to go over escort tactics, which is something slightly more theoretical, and I believe it's like the next step in the series so far in terms of the combat tactics as I've talked about. It's the next big thing because it's what I consider to be like the hardest aspect in War Thunder. So first off, my variation on the loose Deuce doctrine that I talked about in the previous video, the way that I've experienced it as the offensive fighter, that's the lead fighter, the element leader, what I've learned is that most of the time, more often than not, the lead fighter is not so much as the guy that's leading the element to go in to get the kills. All right. If you look back at my previous example on double attack, it's the element leader that goes in, tries to get the kill, and then the wingman is flying cover. Or in the case of loose Deuce, the wingman is setting himself up for an immediate attack. How it's played out so far in our games is the lead fighter most of the time isn't even actually trying to actively get kills. What he's trying to do is set the engagement for his wingman to get the kill. So the way you can think about the lead element leader role is you're like the point guard in basketball or the quarterback in football. You don't need kills to have a good offense in this game. All right. Yeah, you don't need kills to be a good fighter in a team game as well, because most of the time, if you're doing your job well as the leader in a two-ship formation, following my my formula here, my variation of the loose Deuce doctrine as it's implemented in the game, the lead fighter is setting up the engagement for all of his wingmen to get the kills and the rest of his team to get the kills. And if it works out well, which if you do it right, it will work out, you can pretty much win the initial engagement. And if you're in an air dom, you can pretty much win the whole game in the first engagement as you get to the first dogfight over the capture point. The next thing that I've learned is that if you are trying to play the way that I've described in my tutorial series, you're playing the game to win. Is what I consider to be like a competitive situation. If you do this, you will find that the matches are very short. Minimum 4 minutes, and max can go up to about 13, 15, but on average it's around between 4 to 10 minutes. An air arcade match. And that includes the ground strike and the airfield doms, the air doms, frontline, all that stuff. So what I've learned is that every play and maneuver that you pull off in this game is important, because there's not a lot of time in the game. The seconds count. It's a kind of like a misconception that I had before prior to playing, and I think it's a misconception that a lot of people that play the game, especially the realistic guys, think about arcade, is that because you have the respawns and the assisted aiming and all that, whatever, that it's an easier game mode, that every play can be sort of like a throwaway kind of maneuver. You can just go all in without having to think about what's going on. That is not the case. If you are looking to win matches and try to win them as efficiently as possible, every play and maneuver is important because the game is very short. Everything counts. Now on to the main topic of the video, escort tactics. So I've divided it into two. There's close in and far out, and I'll explain it as I go along. But first, to address the common misconceptions and principles, the way that it works out in game, if you're trying to be the escort, you're trying to protect something, whether it be another fighter, a ground attacker, bomber, or an asset like ground targets or an airfield. the way you want to protect it is by intercepting the enemy before the enemy gets into weapons range of the target that you're trying to protect. All right. There's no the way you want to protect things, it doesn't work out the way that a lot of people think, like how it works out, right? You don't fly close to, well, at least you should try not to be close to whatever it is that you're trying to protect. If you're there and the enemy is coming in to attack, you've already failed because the enemy is already in a position to get his weapons on it. You want to get into a position where you deny the enemy from getting their weapons onto the target that you're trying to protect. All right. So first up here, I've got what's called the close-in escort tactics. If you do find yourself in the position, which the most common position is that you are next to whatever it is you're trying to protect. So in this case here, we've got two fighters, and let's just assume that the one on the left here is the ground attack aircraft that's going in to strike the ground targets, and the escort here is the fighter. The way that it needs to go is that as the bandit is coming in to attack, the escort has to make sure that in the initial head-on pass here, that the bandit goes down. All right. So more often than not, if you're trying to do this escort thing, you're not going to get a lot of kills and you are going to die a lot. All right. Because if you take a merge here, head on to this bandit, the bandit is just going to bypass you and go straight for the attacker, the bomber, or whatever it is that you're trying to protect. All right. You have to deny that. So the calculation here before you get into the situation is how much value is this attacker worth? If you've already evaluated that the game is on the line and that your ground attack guy here, he's the only one in position to drop bombs to start bleeding tickets, then you've got to take this head on and, if necessary, ram the bandit. All right, you've got to take him out at all costs. If not, he's just going to bypass, take out the attacker, and basically, you've basically wasted. Because probably if you take the head on and merge, maybe you get hit, maybe you get damaged, maybe you damage the bandit, but he goes in, takes out the attacker. The attacker goes down. That gives you the ability to get in behind and kill the bandit, but you haven't achieved what it was that you were trying to achieve, which was to keep this guy alive. And now you're damaged, your asset is down, and you've gone nowhere basically. So if you're in this position, which is the most common position, because if we're talking about a new game where we're starting out ground strike or frontline or something like that, since all the aircraft, they don't spawn next to each other, there is a slight difference, but it's not that big of a difference, and the fighter can always catch up to the attacker. And he doesn't get the ability to go like really far out because the distance to the target isn't that far. And the ground attack aircraft, if they're losing fast ground attack aircraft, they usually can keep up with the fighter just a little bit. So when you're going into an initial engagement, this is usually how it's going to look like. Therefore, you have to take the head on and you have to make sure he goes down. If we're engaged with multiple bandits, then things get a little bit more wacky. In this case, the escort has to identify which is the closest threat to the attacker. And the escort has to go and engage him first. And he still takes the head-on full commit, all right? Best case scenario, if he takes the head-on and he eliminates a bandit, what he then can do is switch to the next closest bandit and then commit into another head-on if possible. Chances are the enemy, once they see that the fighter is the closest to them, they will switch and usually take the head-on. So this is assuming that you get the first kill, but most often than not, if you have to try and stop this guy, you're gonna take the head-on and possibly ram him. In which case, the other two bandits are gonna have a free attack on the attacker. And this is how it plays out. In this case here, if you're fighting multiple bandits, the escort basically just trades away. And what this does is that it increases the odd for the attacker, because now instead of having to face 3 bandits shooting at him, he only has to face 2, which isn't ideal and it isn't good. He is going to go down eventually, but it's a better chance, all right? The odds are slightly more in favor to the attacker in this case. So just as in the previous slide where the escort takes the head-on and if necessary rams the bandit, he does the same. If he gets lucky and is able to take the bandit out in the head-on at a longer range and avoid the ram, then switch and we repeat. Now onto the second part, which I call far out. So this part here is completely theoretical because I've never been in the situation where I've said to myself that I'm going to be able to make this play and pull it off and it will be effective. Partly because I've never had the opportunity to do so. Most of the time, I'm the attacker in the situation that's going in to hit the ground targets. I'm like the dedicated main ground attack guy. And what happens is that every now and then, over the years, some new guy will come along and say, "Okay, I'm gonna protect you, make sure you stay alive, and uh, hopefully we win the game because I'm taking out all the ground targets or bleeding tickets in whatever match form that we're playing." But what they usually do is they do this, right? They're always flying next to me, which is not where you want to be as the escort, because the distance and closure for the bandits to the the uh, the defending as the asset that you want to defend, you've already failed because they can get the guns on very easily. So the way you wanted to approach it is you need to be out all the way in front. Well, not necessarily in front, but in between me and in between the asset that you're trying to defend and the bandit. You want to be in between them, and you want to have enough distance here that even if you do engage and he tries to bypass you, you have a chance to get in behind and catch up to him and shoot him down even before he reaches the attacker in this case, right? So you want to intercept them as far out as possible. That's the essence of this. And the reason why I say it's theoretical is I've never done it. I've never been able to do it. I haven't had the opportunities to do it. But I've yet to see anybody to actually like actively try to do this either. And one reason that I can think of is, well, basically, if you're all the way out there, you're isolated, and more likely than not, more often than not, you're going to be engaged with multiple bandits. So you're going to be all alone, and you're just fighting a lot of people. And some of the bandits would just bypass you and go straight for the attacker. But in theory, if the fighter pilot here is good enough, and he recognizes the situation, and he recognizes the big picture of the whole map, where the attacker is going to his target and where the bandits are, where the enemy spawn is, where his friendlies are. In theory, he should be able to position himself in such a way that he can deny the majority, if not all, of the bandits from approaching the attacker. And it's completely situational. Depends on the map, depends where the ground targets are, depends this, that, and the other. But I've yet to see anybody that's good enough a fighter to recognize the situation and actually act on it and be able to perform well in that situation, all right? Because most of the times that you see the hardcore air killers, they're opportunists, right? They're like the old school kind of guys that they go out, bait somebody, or they like try getting themselves in a situation where they are untouchable, but they have the opportunity to attack the enemy. Uh, when you're trying to do this in a team game, it doesn't help your team a lot because you're off doing your own thing, far out somewhere else, trying to get kills. And your kills most of the time won't matter for these like dedicated air killers because they're focusing on getting kills. They don't care whether the bandit is a direct threat to the asset or not, or if it's a direct threat to your teammates or your wingman. So yeah, just something to keep in mind.